We have a variety of news to discuss in today's video, including the future of Taylor Hall. It looks as though he and the Coyotes may have engaged in new contract talks. Plus, we also have the Hart Trophy finalists announced. We have a suspension, and we have some draft rumors to discuss as well. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to cover today. Let's kick things off with the announcement from the NHL today on the league MVP for the Hart Trophy. The top three finalists here, which were announced as Leon Draisaitl of the Edmonton Oilers, you had Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche, and you have Artemi Panarin of the New York Rangers. So they are the three finalists going for the Hart Trophy this year. No real big surprises. They all had phenomenal seasons. I think many expect Draisaitl to be the odds-on favorite given how strong of a year he had. And really, he was kind of sticking out as the obvious choice for most, at least, before the NHL season was paused. Of course, Panarin was clearly tearing things up with the Rangers. MacKinnon dominating with Colorado as usual. I guess a few players that you can look at here for a lot of these awards that you could say maybe got shafted or, certainly left out of the mix that had tremendous years would be like David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins. I really thought Pastrnak had an excellent shot at being a finalist. You could probably throw Connor Hellebuyck into there, the Winnipeg Jets. I fully suspect he'll win the Vezina Trophy, or at least I think he should, and I think he should have been considered for the Hart Trophy as well. He was clearly Winnipeg's top player, in my opinion at least, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that he's, in the probably top 5 or 6 vote getters once all of that is revealed later on after the winners are announced. Of course, Draisaitl's teammate Connor McDavid's certainly going to be in the conversation there as well, having another solid year. They're probably going to be your top 5 or 6 vote getters. I mean, obviously, one question though to think about, many of the Professional Hockey Writers Association kind of view the fact that you need to get into the playoffs to really be considered for the Hart Trophy. So if the season would have been completed and the New York Rangers wouldn't have made the playoffs because there was no guarantee they were going to, obviously they will be part of this 2014 format in the play-in series, but they would not have traditionally made the playoffs on its original format. Would have Artemi Panarin gotten the votes that he did? I mean, certainly something to think about for sure. We've seen McDavid be gypped out in past years when the Oilers weren't in the playoff picture as well. So maybe that's the difference between Panarin getting the nod over a guy like Pastrnak, because obviously Pastrnak and the Bruins had a tremendous year. Maybe he didn't get the votes because the Bruins as a team were so much stronger overall as well. Hard to say, but those are your finalists. Let me know who you think is going to win down in the comment section. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have a suspension. I know it's hard to believe we have a suspension even though we don't have active games, but obviously the NHL had an unresolved situation from back in March. One of the final games that were played before the NHL pause took place involved between the New York Rangers and the Colorado Avalanche, and forward Brendan Lemieux of the Rangers was appointed to have a hearing, but just didn't know when it was going to be. Many felt like he would actually be suspended a few games, and that's what was handed down here today. With the NHL getting ready to restart games in the next week or so, the NHL had to decide how to handle this, so the Department of Player Safety have completed their review and have suspended Brendan Lemieux for 2 games. Obviously, it was a late high hit to happen against Avalanche forward Jonas Donskoy. I'll link the player safety video down below in the description in the pinned comment as well, in case you don't remember what happened since it was so long ago. But essentially, Donskoy was going in, took a shot on net, and Brendan Lemieux came in. He was late and he leaned in to make head contact with his shoulder, which made it late and an illegal hit to the head, which was resulted in an interference penalty being called into play, but it was only a minor penalty, and obviously the league felt that further discipline was justified here. Now, I also want to take a look at some 2020 NHL Draft Rumors. We have more talk and more speculation that the LA Kings will in fact draft German-born player Tim Stutzle with their 2nd overall selection. There was reports from AJ Jakubik on TSN Radio in Ottawa saying that he has a lot of contacts within Germany, and that Stutzle was very excited once the draft lottery was completed, that he felt he would definitely be going to the Kings with the number 2 overall pick. Now, we discussed the possibilities in the past, not long after the draft lottery. There were some rumblings about this as well, but from other sources, and they felt that Stutzle had an excellent shot going to Los Angeles for a variety of reasons, but obviously one of them being Marco Sturm, who works with the Kings, is a German-born former NHL player, in the coaching world now, but certainly is very high on Stutzle and seems to be having a decent amount of influence when it comes to your amateur scouting team and the GM, etc. Obviously, they value his input, and Stutzle is a tremendous hockey player. Don't get me wrong, but many felt that it would likely be Quinton Byfield going to Los Angeles, but they also do have a lot of great center prospects in their system already. I mean, Tim Stutzle himself could turn out to be a center. It's not quite clear what he will be at the NHL level, but he has played a lot of center as well as wing in the last few years. Well, he could play either one, maybe a little bit more versatile in that sense, but Byfield's clearly your big, strong, number one center iceman type of prospect, 6'4", 200 plus pounds. He has an NHL ready frame already. Certainly, could use a little bit more maturity. Wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe spend another year in junior. It's quite a strong chance. Of course, assuming there is junior hockey, or how that's going to go this year, we don't really know yet. But I would not be surprised if there's another year before he makes his NHL debut. One thing is for sure, though, regardless of whoever the Los Angeles Kings take, they are going to be getting themselves a tremendous looking prospect. They already have a really deep and solid prospect pool, so they're going to be adding to that even more. But the big thing here would be that it could drop Quinton Byfield to that number 3 spot, which would likely be taken by the Ottawa Senators, who are picking 3rd overall and 5th overall, given that they have San Jose's pick, which was one of the lottery winners, and put them in the 3rd overall position. As I've talked about before, since the 2020 NHL Draft Lottery was revealed and we knew that the Senators were picking 3rd and 5th, it really gives them a lot of flexibility here. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they use both of those picks to possibly take center iceman. As I mentioned before, even though they do have some decent center prospects in the system, I think the ones they would be able to draft in the 2020 NHL draft would be even better and have a higher long-term ceiling than the ones in their system. Like, the one prospect that I really do like is Josh Norris, and sometimes he's a little bit underrated in my opinion. I think he could be a possible number 2, number 3 center, but guys like Logan Brown and Colin White really haven't quite lived up to that hype yet. I mean, Brown has only played a few NHL games, very inconsistent. I mean, maybe he'll make some strides this year, but right now, it's quite a few years now since he was drafted. It's really hard to bank on the idea that he could be a top 2 center iceman for the Senators. And then, of course, you got Colin White, who signed a 6-year contract extension, a little bit older, a little bit more mature. Seems like he'll be an NHL player longer term. I don't have any doubts that way, but he's projecting like he could be a little bit lower in the lineup too. Maybe the offensive numbers might not be there. So if they could add guys like a Quinton Byfield, for example, who seems at this point in his career at least to be a little bit more solid of a number 1 center iceman, that could be a huge find for the Senators. Now, of course, with that 5th overall pick, they'd certainly be at the mercy to whoever Detroit takes at number 4. We've seen different reports on who Yzerman would be leaning towards. We've heard guys like Cole Perfetti could very well go there. Obviously, there's a possibility they could take the Russian goaltender and Askarov. They could take the top defenseman and Jamie Drysdale. They could go for another center like Marco Rossi. The general consensus that I've seen out there seem to think that if those 3 players that go 1, 2, 3 like we're expecting, that the Red Wings would likely take Perfetti. That seems to be, more people seem to think that than anything else that I've seen so far at least. So if that's the case, I would not be surprised at number 5 that you see the Senators then take Marco Rossi if he's still on the board. I mean, they could take Drysdale. I wouldn't rule it out, but they very well could put themselves in an excellent position to have their top 2 center icemen for the long time into the future here, and it wouldn't be shocking to see both of them, be in that role within a year or two with the organization. So I guess we'll see, but according to this information from Jack and Beck on TSN Radio, Stutzle very likely going to the Kings at number 2, which certainly makes things very interesting for Ottawa at 3 and 5. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to discuss the future of Taylor Hall. We had reports come out last night from Craig Custance as well as Elliot Friedman talking about the fact that it looks as though Taylor Hall and the Coyotes have kind of re-engaged in contract talks to extend his contract to keep him with the organization. Now, of course, it's going to be a difficult task for the Coyotes to do. They are very tight up against the salary cap. Having a flat cap is going to impact them probably more than just about most teams. There's, certainly a lot of teams going to be impacted, but they're going to really be hampered by this. I'll give you a quick snapshot of their cap-friendly page showing what they have on the books already for next season, and they have just shy of $80 million. So that's very little space. In trying to sign Taylor Hall, well, that's not possible without shedding a decent amount of salary off the books. And of course, he's not the only player who has an expiring contract with them. They have, I think, 3 or 4 other players that they would either have to sign or replace. So we're looking at the very least, maybe $3 million, $3.5 million if they get all cheap contracts to replace those players. So realistically, they would have to shed at least a little bit of salary just to completely fill out their roster for next season. And of course, that doesn't include a big-time contract for a player like Taylor Hall. Now, of course, before the NHL season was paused, many believed that Taylor Hall would be seeking a long-term deal somewhere around, at least 6 years, but more than likely 7 or 8 if he stayed in Arizona, and probably be somewhere around the $9 to $10 million range, possibly closer to 9. Of course, Arizona has favorable income tax situation compared to a lot of teams, so they might be able to get him in closer to 9, 9.25, somewhere around there. But other teams might have to pay up upwards close to 10 to bring him into their new organization. So obviously a lot has changed though since that time has come. Obviously we have a whole new landscape, a whole new market. The NHL season has been paused. We've lost lots of revenue in the NHL. So things are very, very different here today. Now, of course, the reports that came out last night indicated that there was a big dinner meeting between the Hall and the Coyotes, which included owner Alex Marullo's son, Alex Jr., as well as the newly appointed COO, Xavier Gutierrez. Of course, the big part here that's absent is GM John Chayka. It's certainly interesting to note that management and the COO are kind of taking over negotiations here. At least that's what was indicated in the reports that came out last night. Obviously, Chayka not being present certainly raises some eyebrows, raises some questions. Why is he not involved? There could be a variety of reasons for this, but we don't really have an explanation. Elliot Friedman was able to find out that it doesn't appear as though he's being punished in any way or anything like that. But of course, remember that the Coyotes were being investigated by the NHL for tampering with the testing process of underage junior hockey players, that they were doing testing with players outside of the draft combine, which is not a legal process. We've been waiting for the NHL to talk about this further or announce if there's going to be any kind of discipline on the team or whatnot. We haven't heard anything in quite some time, but Friedman has confirmed that this isn't any kind of league discipline or anything of that nature. So it's clearly a team decision. And of course, why that was, we don't know. But all we can say at this point is certainly raises a lot of question marks around what Arizona is going to do if they don't sign Hall. It looks as though they're at least making an extremely valiant effort here to keep him in the fold. Like I said before, they've given up a lot to bring him in. Taylor Hall, he's kind of gained a reputation for overall making teams worse, even though he himself has been a really solid player in his career. When he's joined teams, they quite often have dropped in performance. He's had a hard time in Edmonton getting any amount of success. Of course, things didn't go great in New Jersey. They did make the playoffs the one time, and that was it. And then, of course, once he went to Arizona, the team actually performed worse than before he got there. I mean, his numbers himself were okay. They always seem to be okay. Like, he's produced at a good level. But for some reason, Taylor Hall seems to have an impact on teams that they just don't seem to be improving and getting better results after he arrives. Of course, he also has a reputation of helping teams land the first overall selection. We've seen how many the Oilers had during his tenure there. He goes to New Jersey not long after arriving with the Devils. They get the first overall pick. It seems to be something to it. So if Arizona loses the play-in series against Nashville here and has an opportunity to go into that phase 2 of the draft lottery, wouldn't be surprised if they come out victorious because of the Taylor Hall effect. At least it's happened before. It's kind of a running joke around the NHL and its fans, but there seems to be something to it. But taking a look here now from Hockey DB's Taylor Hall's career numbers, you have to be careful with this contract. He's going to be 29 going on 30 years old. He obviously won the Hart Trophy a couple of years ago, but obviously, like I said, even though he's been a pretty solid hockey player, he's not that far off from being a point per game kind of guy on a pretty consistent basis, but he misses a lot of time. He seems to be, getting injured often, which is not good, obviously. He's out of the lineup, sometimes substantially. If you look at the last 2 years especially, he's missed a fair bit of time, which is not great. And you just have to wonder, is he really going to be worth it for the Coyotes to sign to a long-term mega contract? $7, $8, $9 million? Is he the guy who they can build around to take this really up a notch? I'm not convinced that he is. I think he's more of a complimentary player. We've seen this numerous times with other top talent. It's not that they're not good hockey players. They're tremendous players, but they're just not able to lead on their own. Like, look at his teammate, Phil Kessel. He's a prime example. Kessel was dealt to the Maple Leafs and was really kind of looked upon as being the guy there and was going to take the Leafs up to the promised land. And even though he had a lot of really solid regular seasons, scored a lot of goals, he just wasn't that top player they could build around. And after a failed era in Toronto of getting a lot of long-term team success, they ship him off to Pittsburgh, and then he had great success. He got a couple Stanley Cups to his name after being, arguably the third or fourth best player in their lineup. That's the kind of player that he turned out to be, where he could play a better role. And now you got guys like Kessel and Hall in Arizona trying to be that top guy to bring them to the promised land, and I'm just not sure that they're going to get it done here. So I would hope that the Arizona Coyotes would not overpay a ridiculous price to a long-term deal and end up regretting it, because obviously that happens quite a bit. It's really going to boil down to what would Taylor Hall accept. Elliot Friedman had previously reported not that long ago that he felt if there was any potential UFA on the market that he thought might surprise everybody and take a short-term contract to get himself into a winning situation and focus more on the winning than the money, that he said that would be Taylor Hall for this year. And obviously many people feel he'd be a great fit with a team like the Avalanche, where he could be, their second, third best player, be more of a complementary piece and really help take them over the top to make them more of a contending team instead of trying to put a team on his back and get them there on his own. I don't know. It's just interesting to see the fact that he's having, engagement here on contract talks without the GM being present. That's certainly, from a team perspective, very interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that situation. And obviously nobody would comment on this either between Friedman and Custance. They've reached out for more comments, and the agent for Taylor Hall, Darren Ferris, as well as the team, would not comment any further. So everybody's staying hush-hush, so that's not a big surprise either. The fact is, looks as though there's lots of talks going on. He's at least considering staying. Looks as though they're considering throwing some money at him. But what's it going to take to keep him in Arizona? Would he consider taking that short-term deal with the Coyotes that Friedman was alluding to in previous reports? I'm not so sure. I think in a situation with the Coyotes, he might want more term and more money, because he probably feels it's going to take a little bit longer to get them to be that contending team. Whereas if another team like the Avalanche, as an example, were to throw a one-year deal at him, he might take that for an opportunity to get into the playoffs and see if he can get himself on the Stanley Cups. Now, jumping back to their cap situation, though, for next year, they're going to have to move out a fair bit of money. As we talked about yesterday, a guy like Derek Stepan is pretty much going to have to go. They're going to have to find a way to move that contract. Maybe even a guy like Antti Ranta as well, because they also have to factor in the Seattle expansion draft, which is not too far away. So obviously having two pretty good goalies like Ranta and Kumper in the fold might not be wise when it comes time for that, because they'd probably be at risk to lose whoever they don't protect, which I assume at this point likely would be Ranta. But they're going to have to move out some pretty significant money to keep Taylor Hall in the fold. So let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think it's realistic? Do you think these talks are going to lead to a potential contract of him remaining in the desert for at least the short term, maybe even the long term? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.